You're listening to the Unfixed podcast.
The number one lifeline for me is humor. This first became apparent to me when I was pregnant with my son about 8 years ago, and I struggled, as many women do, with morning sickness. You know, you can only chew so many ginger chews and drink ginger tea before you never want to eat ginger again. But I had been listening to comedy online, like stand-up comedy. It was amazing because I realized I actually felt less sick when I was listening to this comedy. Like something physiologically was changing in my body. And I've been using it ever since, and not just when I'm feeling physically ill, but when I'm feeling down emotionally. I can really just shift things with laughter.
Hi, everyone. This is the Unfixed podcast, and I'm your host, Martel Catalano. The chronic illness community often talks to each other, but in this show, we open the dialogue, exploring adversity through different walks of life to recognize our shared humanness. These intimate conversations are between people who are creatively contending with diverse challenges. One person has a chronic health condition because they're often experts in facing the hard stuff. The other is a professional working within a relevant field or facing their own unique battle. Each episode is an invitation to lean into curiosity and compassion while recognizing that we can live powerful lives despite, or sometimes because of, our circumstances. This podcast is part of a suite of resources provided by Beyond My Battle. If you feel inclined to support the show, you can do so at beyondmybattle.org/donate. That quote we opened with was from Jeneye Abele. She's a subject in the award-winning video series called Unfixed. Jeneye is also the CEO of the Argosy Foundation, where she is responsible for promoting its vision of empowering all people to make a positive difference in their worlds. More so, she is a mother who hopes to empower her kids to do the same. 11 years ago, in the middle of walking through her house, Jeneye's left leg stopped listening to her brain. Other symptoms, including body aches, fatigue, and involuntary muscle movement, started to appear. Eventually, she was diagnosed with transverse myelitis as a result of a lesion on her spinal cord. Her symptoms can last anywhere from a minute to a day. At times, she powers through her symptoms, sometimes, and I quote, walking like a zombie, which can be entertaining if the achiness and fatigue aren't bad. Other times, when available, she seeks peace and solitude to ride out the flare-ups. Her love of laughter and comedy has been a lifeline for her as she adapts to and evolves with her condition. And today, we're excited to hear Jeneye share a conversation with another super cool human who also sees humor as an important compass, Dr. Joel Goodman. Dr. Joel Goodman is founder and director of the Humor Project and has been a pioneer focusing on the positive power of humor and creativity since 1977. His work has been featured in over 7,000 TV and radio shows, newspapers, and magazines, including The Today Show, PBS, BBC, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Times Sunday Magazine, USA Today, and the Journal of the American Medical Association. Described as the first full-time humor educator in the world, Joel takes his work very seriously, and he takes himself very lightly as he helps people get more smilage out of their lives and jobs. His own most important mentors when it comes to humor are his family, and especially his 4-year-old grandson with whom he FaceTimes with daily for a therapeutic dose of comedy. Joel also happens to serve on the board of directors at Beyond My Battle. Together, Joel and Jeneye are here with us today to share a fun, open-hearted conversation about how humor can help carry us through the most difficult of times. Jeneye and Joel, I am so happy to introduce you to each other.
Hello, Jeneye.
Hello, Joel. It's nice to meet you.
We're so glad to have you both on the show, and you both have said that humor has played a crucial role in your lives through challenging circumstances. I'm wondering if you can both talk about a time when humor had perhaps saved you.
Well, I'll jump in. The first time I noticed the impacts of humor on my health, or when I first made that connection, was actually when I was pregnant with my son. And I had pretty bad morning sickness, and there's really not a lot you can do or take for it. But I discovered that when I listened to stand-up comedy, I was able to just divert my attention away from that lack of comfort and that basically wanting to barf. And it was pretty powerful. And I've been using it as a tool ever since.
For me, my first conscious awareness of the power of humor came in 1977, when my dad discovered he had an aneurysm in his aorta, which was not a laughing matter at all. He and Mom flew from Maryland, where they were, to Houston, Texas, where Dr. Michael DeBakey, the world-renowned cardiac pioneer and surgeon, was going to perform this life-or-death operation on Dad. And I flew from Saratoga Springs area down to Houston to join them and lend whatever support I could. And if you wanted a before picture of stress and anxiety, all you had to do was look at our family. We were literally uptight with tension and terror. And then the wonderful proverbial funny thing happened on the way to the hospital. Mom and I were staying at a hotel that had one of these shuttle vans that ran back and forth to the hospital on a regular basis. The man who drove the van was named Alvin. And Alvin was a magician, in the figurative sense, because in the 4-minute drive from the hotel to the hospital, he magically transformed terrorized people like us into people who were able to laugh and chuckle and let go of the angst. His magic trick was his sense of humor. He had the ability in those short 4 minutes to use his childlike, spontaneous, kidding perspective to help us lighten our mental and emotional loads. So when we saw Dad in the hospital, instead of adding to his already high stress level, we were able to help him lighten up and let go of some of it. Thankfully, in short story here, Dad made it through the surgery. It was a close call, but he made it. And I got back home to Saratoga Springs after a couple of weeks in Houston, and all of a sudden the light bulb went on. I got to thinking about this stranger Alvin who had come to our family's life when we most needed the gift and the respite of laughter. And I began to wonder, do we have to wait for the Alvins of the world to come into our lives when we most need the gift and the power of humor? And so it was that personally painful situation, a scary situation, that actually prompted me in 1977 to start this organization called the Humor Project. And my goal was not to analyze humor to death, but to see if there are practical ways of bringing it to life. So it was that very stressful situation with Dad that jump-started my awareness of the power of humor.
So Joel, I heard you say in, I think, a TED Talk, humor is an attitude. Can you talk about how you landed on that idea, and if this experience that you were just talking about, visiting your hospital and meeting Alvin, was that sort of where that originated?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the things that I've discovered is that when I go in to speak to serious corporations or hospitals or school systems, and they hear that I am from the quote-unquote Humor Project, people have what I call a myth conception. They think I'm going to tell everybody you need to become a stand-up comedian on the job. That is not my message. Although joke telling is certainly one way of transmitting humor, it's not the only way. And I really see it much more broadly and importantly as an attitude. Humor is an attitude. It's a way of giving us perspective on an otherwise overwhelming or very serious or painful situation. So I think humor certainly includes joke telling, but it goes way beyond. It is an attitude. And Alvin's attitude, his playful, childlike, spontaneous attitude, is really where humor lives.
playful, spontaneous, childlike attitude. I think that's something we could all benefit from in our lives, Joel. I love that you make this sound so accessible too. Like, humor lives in our attitude, and it's not something that requires like tickets to a comedy club or something like that, although that would be nice too.
I was wondering, Jeneye, your awareness of the power of humor coming with your pregnancy 11 years ago, were you somebody who had a good sense of humor as a kid growing up? Were you pleasantly aware of it? Were you class clown? When did humor awareness come into your life, or was it just at that moment when you're pregnant?
Yeah, I suppose the distinction between that moment when I was pregnant was really more the power of humor to transcend physical discomfort. I think I've always loved laughing. I remember watching Saturday Night Live as a kid, and when I was in high school, I really one of my dreams was to be one of the cast members on Saturday Night Live. And I loved doing impressions of people. And my mom has a pretty funny sense of humor. She actually had a stroke 3 years ago, and she's in a nursing home, and she still makes all the staff laugh. Like, she just has this very funny, kind of naughty sense of humor, and she's kind of a proper person, so it's even funnier coming from her. But she kind of, I think, demonstrated that for us. And then I have older brothers who were pretty funny as well. So yeah, I think it's always been something that I've appreciated, but not really, I didn't make a conscious connection about how much I appreciated it. I thought it was just sort of part of everyone's lives, or it should be, but I didn't think it was that unusual to like it that much.
Well, I think on some level, we are human beings and humor beings, and we all have different flavors of humor that we enjoy. Some people will like a double scoop of this one and, would pass on another one. Is there somebody who's been a model for you or a humor influence in your adult years, even after your diagnosis?
I like comedy that's edgy, but in a good way. Like, not offensive, because I feel like that ends up, even if I laugh a little bit, my body kind of doesn't feel good after that. Whereas if it's making you question things, like Dan Cummins, I think is really great in that way. He will bring up like income inequality or something and somehow make it funny, but also bring attention to it. And so it feels sort of like he's bringing awareness to an important topic, but also making it fun and funny.
Well, I actually think the most powerful and delightful humor for me is that which makes you laugh and think at the same time. I think there's a fine line, balance beam that we sometimes need to walk. And one of the things that we've been doing with the Humor Project over the last 43 plus years is focusing on the positive power of humor. Because I think humor is a tool that, depending on how it's used, could also be used as a weapon. Mm-hmm. My perspective is that we have enough pain in this world without adding to it from humor.
Agreed.
So, the title of our conferences, we've done 55 conferences now, international conferences. The title is The Positive Power of Humor and Creativity. And, for me, I make a real clear distinction between laughing at others and laughing with others. Mm-hmm. I think the laughing at ends up hurting in the short term and the long term, and also can backfire. I mean, some people have lost their jobs because of laughing at others. Whereas laughing with others gets us to embrace each other as a common humanity. And I actually have, over the years, come up with different distinctions, that laughing at others can be based on contempt and insensitivity, whereas laughing with others is based on caring and empathy. Laughing at others can destroy confidence through put-downs, whereas laughing with others builds confidence. And, laughing at others, a person doesn't choose necessarily to be made fun of, whereas then laughing with others, a person can choose to be the butt of a joke, as in laughing at yourself. So I think it's a fuzzy and fine line, but an important line for us to walk of, how do we get with it and laugh with each other instead of at each other? And especially with people facing chronic illness or disabilities, I've been aware of so much pain inflicted on those who have a challenge and being made fun of by others.
Right. And there's so many disabilities that are hard to see or understand, but that someone might behave differently enough that they get poked fun at. And I feel like that's also just as painful.
Yeah, and there are enough invisible disabilities that, or if the person himself or herself does not have that challenge, then maybe somebody in their family does. And,
right.
I think it is a small world. And I think the more we can build each other up with humor rather than tear each other down, the better off we'll all be.
Wow, yeah, I'm starting to think we should all have required classes in comedy, reading, writing, arithmetic, and humor. There's such a fine line between humor that lifts us up and humor that tears us down. That's so true. And is it ever one size fits all?
I don't think all comedians can get it right all the time. And I think some comedy is just not going to feel right for some people. And for other people, it's going to be awesome. Maria Bamford, as one example, who is one of my favorites, she has struggled with some mental illness issues, and she's quite open about it. And I think it's been really great for some people, but it might be too triggering for other people. And I think that's sort of one of those fine lines where you kind of have to pick and choose. And is there justification for censoring anything that may come across as offensive, or do we leave room for having a little wiggle room there?
Yeah, nobody's perfect. That's for sure. And I spell perfect Perfekt. I think we as human beings are imperfect by definition, and I think the more we can be aware of those sensitivities, when it comes to sense of humor, there are actually many senses of humor. And at the same time, I think the ability to laugh at ourselves is a godsend that we can give ourselves. And to be careful that it doesn't become a self-denying or self-deprecating thing where you loathe yourself. I think if we do it right, laughing at ourselves can help us move from loathing ourselves to loving ourselves and accepting our imperfections. Stephen Hawking, certainly well known, and somebody with ALS who recently passed away, he talked about when he turned 21, his expectations were reduced to zero. It was important that he came to appreciate what he did have. It was also important not to become angry, no matter how difficult life is, because you can lose all hope if you can't laugh at yourself and at life in general. So I think we all need to walk that balance beam of how do we use that ability to laugh at ourselves, to not loathe ourselves, but to love ourselves, to embrace ourselves.
And to the extent that comedians can set the example of sort of laughing at their experiences, but not confusing whether it's making mistakes or struggles, not confusing that with their overall character and humanity.
Yeah, and I think we have enough in common as human beings that there's a lot we can laugh about in unison. Carol Channing, we had her on a humor cruise a number of years ago. And it was star of Broadway, Hello Dolly, over 5,000 performances. The title of her talk at our Humor Cruise conference was the first 80 years are the hardest. And at that point, she was in her early 90s. Carol, I think, laughed at us collectively, as well as at herself at the same time. So I think the more we can find in common that we share as challenges or stresses, then the ability to laugh at ourselves comes more easily.
Do you think humor can break down political barriers?
Well, we sure could use that these days, couldn't we?
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I was aware of is that the whole notion that humor can help us to disagree without being disagreeable. The key in democracy is not necessarily that we agree, but that we participate. And despite all of the heavy problems, domestic and international, there's humor. Humor transcends partisanship. Those are words actually from President Jerry Ford many years ago. And we certainly could use those words today. Because I think humor really is a way of bringing us together. It's a way of team building in an organization. It's a way of community building or even nation building on a larger scale. And so I think humor helps us find out what we have in common and to dance with the disagreements.
Yeah, and I think it could also be a way of sort of disarming the power of all the disinformation and misinformation out there right now. And it's like people are operating in two different realities, but we can laugh at the same things. And I feel like humor can reveal our shared values. Absolutely.
We have much more in common as human beings or humor beings, depending on how you look at it. And whether you agree or disagree with a certain person's politics, for example, Ronald Reagan, some people agreed and some people disagreed with his policies and approaches. When his eulogy was being given by President Bush, Bush number one, he recalled the time that Reagan had met with South Africa's Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And so after the meeting, Bush asked Reagan, well, how did your meeting go with Tutu? And Reagan deadpanned, so-so. So, whether you agree or disagree with a person politically or otherwise, I think humor is a way of bringing us together. I've been using the words of Victor Borge on our stationery and our envelopes, for 43 plus years now. And those words are, a smile is the shortest distance between two people. And if you think about it, it really is. And it's a way of bringing us together, even if we do have differences.
Humor beings instead of human beings. I love that. I think about how easy it is to connect with people through laughter. And, a good friend of mine has cerebral palsy, and she has such a sense of humor about life and mobility and her service dog and all of that. And I just think that she's just so easy to connect with because of her ability to laugh at things and soak up the spontaneity of life with a disability in a really fun way.
Yeah, this is a little goofy, but there's a Crosby, Stills, and Nash lyric. If you smile at me, I will understand, because that is something everyone can understand in every language, something like that. But it's a common theme.
Yeah. And, why not bring ourselves together? We especially need to be together in these COVID-dominated times. We really need humor more than ever. One of the things that I have been doing is sort of gathering, aggregating examples of humor in dealing with something as serious as COVID. And in our recent e-zines, we have an email newsletter that goes out periodically. I just pulled some of them together as a way of helping us share our common humanity and our common stresses. Some of them range from seeing a classified ad, single man with toilet paper seeks woman with hand sanitizer for good, clean fun. Another one was 2020 is a unique leap year. It had 29 days in February, 30 days in March, and 5 years in April. Another one was, my house got toilet papered last night. It is now appraised at $875,000. So, I think there's ways that with the common stresses that we all face, that we can bring ourselves together through humor.
So true. So true. And it's an uplifting thought too, that something as enjoyable as humor can be one of the most powerful ways of bringing us together. But this is hard, and my heart goes out to all of you, everyone. I mean, it's hard for all of us, and but we're not alone. And hopefully we'll be making jokes about, we already are, but the shitty stuff hopefully will be joked about in the future. Because hindsight is 20/20 and funny, hopefully.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people, serious adults, or should I say solemn adults, look askance at humor. That's kid stuff, that's childish, that's not for real, it's not for keeps. We have more important, serious things to deal with in life. But if you look at it, I think there's a real difference between behaviors that are childish and perspectives that are childlike. And I would suggest having a childlike perspective actually could be a very mature adult coping mechanism.
Absolutely. When do you think humor, are there times when humor is just inappropriate? I mean, I've been at funerals where people tell funny stories and it's lovely.
Yeah, we actually had a direct experience of that around 1978 or so. A good friend of ours who was in a professional support group with us passed away unexpectedly. There was an accident. And we went to the memorial service, and it was amazing and amusing that the service was filled with laughter, because Jack was this off the beaten path kind of guy, and people were telling Jack stories, and people were roaring about it. And I got to thinking, what an interesting juxtaposition. At a memorial service, the best tribute that was being paid to Jack was for his sense of humor. And so it was an interesting alpha omega awareness that, even and especially in the most serious of situations, humor can be a godsend. Humor can help us keep on going. And it's a great way of paying tribute to each other. When you are experiencing flare-ups, is there anything you can do in the heat of that moment to jumpstart your sense of humor? Is there anything that you found seems to be effective in getting that laughter going, or at least the internal smiles going?
I do have this thing, one symptom that makes me walk kind of funny, which it really is, it can be kind of funny because I walk kind of like, in the Thriller video, in Michael Jackson's Thriller video, the zombies start sort of, their feet kind of shuffle forward and this kind of jerky motion. It's a little bit like that, although I recently watched the video and I was like, not quite. It's hard to capture, but regardless, it can be kind of funny. And especially if I'm in the grocery store, and for some reason, I sometimes have these flare-ups in grocery stores. I'm not really sure why. I will just be pushing my cart, shuffling my feet. And, I've had this for 11 years. So it started in my late 30s and I looked kind of like a zombie, but, I'm wearing running shoes and running tights or something. And, there's humor in it. The flare-ups often come when I'm in stress, whether it's physical or emotional stress. So sometimes finding the humor is challenging. So if I'm able to escape and find a quiet place, sometimes I'll listen to stand up just to kind of change. it honestly changes my body chemistry when I laugh. So that sends a different set of hormones through my body, which helps reduce the inflammation. In my opinion, I don't know. I'm not the neuroscientist here, but that's my guess, is that there is an actual physiological impact that happens if I can laugh.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's not rocket science, but it is neuroscience.
Right.
Research over the last 5 decades has told us that what Reader's Digest has been suggesting is really true, that laughter is the best medicine. Physiologically, there are all kinds of great things that happen inside when we laugh. Our respiration and circulation are enhanced, our blood is oxygenated, stress-related hormones are suppressed, and it activates the immune system. And so I think there are a lot of good things that happen when we laugh. And one of my suggestions is we should jest for the health of it, because humor is healthy. In fact, we've done a number of programs across the country. We had written a grant for the cancer support community, and we traveled across the country doing programs for their affiliates. And the title of the program was Humor, Hope, and Healing. And the whole notion was that, yeah, this is serious. Humor can help our health. We also did a series of programs around the country, from the East Coast to the West Coast and Hawaii, for wounded warriors. Take a look at how humor can help them face, whether it be PTSD or physical disabilities they incurred while being in the service. And I think even and especially in the most serious of health crises, humor is a godsend. In fact, one of my good friends, Sylvia, years ago had sent me a little quote saying, "Crisis is a shortcut to the future." And I think humor is a good way to help us bushwhack when, in that crisis.
That's awesome. Yeah, humor is the machete that cuts through all the underbrush.
And one of the things I would suggest to listeners is, why not put together your own humor first aid kit? Or I call it a mirth aid kit, so that you can pull together those stimuli that tickle your funny bone, that jumpstart your laughter in a preventive way. Either to head off those flare-ups, or if you're in the middle of one of those flare-ups, to be able to tickle it before it tackles you. And it could be as simple as just pulling together some quotes to give you an attitude or perspective. One of the ones that I love for myself is from Robert Frost, who said, "The brain is a wonderful organ. It starts the moment you get up in the morning and does not stop until you get to work."
Yeah, I have to say, just a plug for a TV show that got me through the first month of COVID was The Good Place. Brilliant. Such a good, sweet show. It was wonderful.
One other thing in my humor first aid kit is a little bumper sticker I got from a woman named Linda Brandenburg, who came to our conference years ago from Valdez, Alaska. And it's a bumper sticker that I take with me everywhere. It says very simply, "We're all here because we're not all there." And for me, it's a tongue-in-cheek way of being able to laugh at myself and to realize that this is really mindfulness. Because if we're not present, then we're missing life. And being in the present moment is where we experience laughter and the joy that comes from it. So I think we need to be mindful about humor.
Well said. I totally agree. There's nothing like humor to bring you back to the present.
Well, that's the best way to end the episode that I can think of. Thank you both so much for joining us, for your wisdom and for your sense of humor. We really appreciate you both being on the show.
Great. Thank you so much.
Jeneye, good to meet you.
You too.
Listeners can learn more about Joel and Jeneye by heading to the episode page on beyondmybattle.org or unfixedfilm.com. The Unfixed podcast is a collaboration between Unfixed Media Productions and Beyond My Battle, a nonprofit helping people reduce the stress of illness and disability. If you want to learn more about the Unfixed documentary, visit unfixedfilm.com or subscribe to the Unfixed Community YouTube channel. As always, if this show or particular episode resonated with or helped you in some way, please leave us a review or share with your friends and family.